I never imagined that one day I'd be served an eviction notice, not by a stranger, but by my own son. The invoice sat quietly on the kitchen table, bathed in the pale February morning light. I had just poured myself a cup of tea, thinking it was another piece of junk mail. But no, it was a rental agreement, along with a bill demanding $4,800 in overdue rent. And the sender? David Miller, my oldest son, the same boy who once promised to always take care of Mom. I sank into my chair, my hands trembling, not from the cold, but from the shattering realization. I wasn't a mother anymore. I was a tenant in my own home. My name is Helen Miller, 72 years old. I've been a widow for 35 of them. This house, every brick of it, was built by my late husband, Richard. A skilled mason, a gentle man. We weren't wealthy, but we had love, and we had a dream. And this little house was the crown jewel of that dream. I believed I was a good mother. I gave up everything: retirement savings, personal comfort, even the idea of travel, so our 3 children could have better lives. When Richard passed suddenly at 58, I didn't fall apart. I stayed. I kept the house intact. I kept it alive for them. David, my eldest, held my hand and cried, like a child at his father's funeral. Mark, the middle one, came by to mow the lawn and fix the fence, like he was honoring his dad's legacy. And Sarah, my youngest, called me every morning just to hear my voice. I thought I did it right. I sacrificed for the right reasons. But maybe I was wrong. The change was gradual. A few family heirlooms began to disappear. Richard's antique clock, my mother's porcelain vase. My children said they were keeping them safe. I believed them. Then came the requests for money. A few hundred for car repairs, then thousands for tuition, for debt, for emergencies. I gave without question, but over time the requests turned into demands. When I hesitated, Rachel, David's wife, would smile sweetly and say, "Mom, you always taught us that family comes first, remember?" Eventually, David suggested he handle my finances, so I wouldn't have to worry anymore. I agreed, not out of trust, but out of exhaustion. I signed, I let go. And today I got a rent bill. I called David. Rachel answered. Her voice was light, casual, as if we were chatting about the weather. "Oh, so you finally got it. That's great. We're trying to make things fair. Everyone has to contribute, you understand." I hung up. I looked around. The wedding photo of Richard and me was gone. My favorite armchair had disappeared. Little by little, the home I built was being erased, and so was I. I was still breathing inside this house, but I had become a guest, an afterthought. Sometimes the last person served dinner, if there was anything left. They thought I was weak, that I'd stay silent like I always had. But they forgot I was the wife of a man who built a world with nothing but his hands. And I survived grief, poverty, loneliness, and betrayal. They were wrong. After that phone call with Rachel, I didn't reach out to anyone else. I was afraid of my own children's voices, afraid of words wrapped in sweetness but sharp as needles. I started to feel like a stranger in the very home my husband built, and I had preserved for nearly half a century. They didn't kick me out with words. They simply pushed me out of everything familiar, one piece at a time. My favorite armchair for reading, gone. The Christmas scarf Richard gave me in 1985, accidentally thrown out. Our wedding photo, replaced by David and Rachel's. Even my old teacup, packed away because it clashed with the new kitchen decor. I was no longer Helen. I was the old lady, spoken of like an outdated decoration. and if I no longer matched the aesthetic, I should be quietly set aside. Then came the summer barbecue, my granddaughter's birthday, Mark's daughter. I wasn't invited. Rachel casually said, "The kids just want friends over. It might be too noisy for you." I baked some cookies anyway and took them upstairs. From my bedroom window, I could hear laughter and music. The smell of grilled meat drifted in, but no one came to get me. No one looked up. Sarah stopped calling. When I called her, she was busy, with meetings, with her husband, with her life. Mark remained silent. No one asked how I was. No one looked at me for more than a second. I was still there, breathing but invisible. Like a shadow, they refused to see. I didn't argue, I didn't complain. I stayed quiet, just like I had for 35 years. Until that Thanksgiving. Rachel announced she'd be hosting this year. I didn't object. I still woke up early to bake a pumpkin pie, Richard's favorite. I got dressed, brushed my hair, and planned to come down early to help. But when I reached the stairs, I froze. The table was already full. The turkey had been carved, the dishes were served, laughter echoed across the room. No one looked up as I entered. There was no chair for me, no space for my pie. No one said my name. I stood there, bathed in the golden light and the clinking of silverware, like an uninvited guest. Quietly, I turned around and went back upstairs. I set the pie down. My hands were shaking, but this time I didn't cry, not a single tear. I opened my closet and pulled out a small suitcase. From that day on, I packed one thing at a time, a few notebooks, old photos, important documents. I kept them in the trunk of my car, quietly, unnoticed. I had spent my whole life protecting this house, and now I was learning how to walk away from it. But before I left, I needed to know, do I still have any rights left? And if I do I have the courage to take them back? The morning after Thanksgiving, I left the house early. While it was still quiet, Rachel was likely still asleep. David never bothered to wake up early on weekends. As for the children, they probably had no idea their grandmother had stood in silence the night before, pie in hand, with nowhere to sit at her own family's table. I drove out of town, my hands trembling, but my mind clearer than it had been in years. I remembered a name, Claire Martinez, a young attorney that Sarah once mentioned during a community talk about elder abuse. Back then, I just nodded, thinking that could never happen to me. And now I was living proof. Claire's office was on the second floor of a red brick building near downtown Portland. She was younger than I imagined, in her early 30s, with neatly tied hair and eyes that were both sharp and kind. I told her everything. I left nothing out. The rent bill, the missing items, Rachel's cold stares, like I was just an old piece of furniture. Claire didn't interrupt. She nodded, listened, and handed me a cup of tea. No one asked if I was tired, but with every word I felt a little lighter. Then she asked, "Do you have any assets not in anyone else's name? Anything at all?" I went silent. Then I remembered. Richard had purchased a small duplex outside Portland years ago, entirely in my name. He called it our last reserve, just in case. I had never touched it, because I believed I would never need to. Claire's eyes widened. She asked to see the trust documents. I drove home and quietly retrieved the file from a locked drawer, a file I'd kept for 20 years but never once reopened. The trust was thorough, and there was a clause I had never noticed before. Should Helen Miller experience coercion, manipulation, or lose her right to safe housing due to actions by any family member, she retains full authority to access the income and equity of the trust property, to secure housing, pursue legal action, or reclaim rightful ownership. I looked at Claire, she looked at me, and we both knew this was no longer about family. This was a fight for dignity. From that day on, I began to change. I didn't retreat, but I didn't strike back right away either. I chose a different path. I played weak. I kept washing dishes, doing laundry. I smiled at Rachel. I nodded and stayed silent, as if I had surrendered. But inside, I was preparing. I took photos of every grocery receipt I paid for that no one acknowledged. I recorded every cruel comment. I installed a baby monitor disguised as a nightlight in the hallway, where Rachel often yelled at me when no one was watching. I wrote in a journal every night, documenting everything, dates, times, words. Claire quietly worked alongside me. She reviewed the documents I had signed. She found clear evidence that the transfer of the house had been unethical, bordering on coercion. She began drafting legal notices, a formal eviction letter, a petition to reclaim control of the trust, a cease and desist addressed to Rachel, forbidding her from interfering with my legal rights. I no longer cried. I was waiting, and when the time came, I would stand tall, with proof in hand, and reclaim what was mine. Monday morning, a light December rain tapped against the windows. The air was cold enough to sting the bones, but my chest felt warm, steady with purpose. It wasn't anger, it was certainty. Today I would do what I should have done long ago. I woke up early, as I always did, brewed a pot of Earl Grey. The kitchen ticked with familiar rhythms, the gas stove igniting with its usual click, the wall clock marking each second, faint footsteps creaking above me. But today, I wasn't just the woman who made the tea. Today, I was the rightful owner of this house, and I was about to take it back. In my hands were 3 thick envelopes, each one carefully labeled, David, Sarah, Mark. I slid them beneath their bedroom doors, no fanfare, no warning. Inside, a legal eviction notice, effective within 30 days. A sworn residency affidavit proving I had lived at this address continuously for 35 years. A copy of the trust Richard left me, the asset they had no idea still existed. A legal citation from Oregon state law defining the financial abuse of elders, something David and Rachel had unknowingly committed. I returned to the kitchen and sat down, my hand resting on the teacup. My heart was pounding, but I wasn't trembling. Fear had left me the night I stood without a seat at Thanksgiving. 10 minutes later, footsteps stormed down the hall. My bedroom door slammed open so hard the wall shook. Rachel burst in, gripping the paper like it had burned her fingers. Her face was red, her breath short with fury. "What the hell is this? Are you out of your mind? You think you can throw us out? This is our house." I stood slowly, calm, unshaken. I looked her straight in the eyes. For the first time in decades, I did not look away. "Number, this is my house, and you took it from me, silently, manipulatively. Now I'm taking it back." David appeared behind her, pale and rattled. He looked at me, then at the paper, then back at Rachel. His voice cracked. "Mom, this has to be a misunderstanding. I just wanted to help you manage things, remember?" I smiled, softly, but with a sharp edge. "Help? By making me pay rent to live in my own home? By replacing my photos with yours? By leaving me to eat alone upstairs on Thanksgiving? Is that your definition of help, David? Or is it erasure?" Rachel shouted again. David started to cry. They switched tactics, blame, then begging, then back to shouting, but I didn't back down. Sarah and Mark remained silent. Sarah sent me a text. "Mom, is this real? You hired a lawyer?" I stared at the screen. I didn't reply. I wasn't here to explain. I was here to act. 3 days later, the backyard was buzzing. Sarah was throwing an engagement celebration, her second one. String lights glowed from the fences, white tablecloths fluttered, and laughter spilled into the cold December air. I wasn't invited. Rachel had passed the message through Mark. Just a young crowd this time, don't want to tire her out. I stood on the upstairs balcony and watched it all. The house had been redecorated, the garden rearranged. They were trying to erase my presence from every corner. But they forgot one thing. I was still here, and I was no longer weak. Today, they would hear me. And this time, I wouldn't come alone. I'd bring the law with me. That afternoon, the sky was overcast, heavy with the promise of rain. But the backyard of my home was glowing. String lights twinkled along the fences, crisp white linens draped across long tables, and name cards sat neatly atop polished plates. It was an engagement party, Sarah's second, and I was not on the guest list. Rachel had told Mark, just a young crowd, let her rest. I had rested enough. I wore a deep blue dress, the one Richard had picked for me years ago. A beige wool scarf around my shoulders. I carried an old leather bag, but this time it didn't hold cookies or small gifts. It held legal documents, and I wasn't alone. Walking just behind me was Claire Martinez, sharp in her gray suit, calm, composed. In her arms were two folders, one for me, one for them. I stepped into the party like a winter gust slicing through spring air. The music played on, the laughter flowed, but heads started to turn. Rachel saw me first. Her brow furrowed, and she rose from her seat. "What are you doing here?" I didn't answer right away. I looked around the yard, at faces that once called me Mom, once held my hand in hospitals, once texted "Love you, Mom" on birthdays, and yet stood silent when I was being erased from my own home. Claire stepped forward. Her voice rang clear, cutting through the hum of chatter. "Mrs. Helen Miller is the sole legal owner of this property. She has been subjected to financial exploitation, denied residential rights, and emotionally abused by members of her own family." Gasps, whispers. No one moved. I took the folder from Claire and walked to the head table, where Sarah and her fiancé sat. I'm no longer the silent mother. I'm not waiting for apologies anymore. I am reclaiming this home with the law, and I am reclaiming my name. David turned pale. Rachel opened her mouth, but Claire raised her hand, holding a second official document, stamped and sealed by the court. David and Rachel Miller have been formally served a 30-day notice to vacate this residence. Failure to comply will result in legal proceedings, including charges related to elder financial abuse. I stood there, calm, unwavering, not angry, just finished. I looked at Sarah. She didn't meet my eyes. Mark stood behind her, stunned. Someone raised a phone, then another. Within moments, the phones were everywhere, capturing a 72-year-old woman standing at the center of a celebration that never intended to include her, reclaiming her dignity. Claire leaned toward me and whispered, "They're recording. This story will travel faster than you think." I nodded. I didn't need attention. I needed the truth to be seen. 3 days after the engagement party, the confrontation video went viral. I didn't know who uploaded it first, but by the time Claire sent me the link, it already had hundreds of thousands of views. There I was, 72 years old, standing in the middle of a garden party, stating my name, claiming my house, and demanding justice. The comments were divided. Some read, "This woman is a legend, the true backbone of a broken family." Others were cruel. "Old lady fighting her own kids for a house, shameful." But I didn't care. I didn't need the world to understand me. I needed one thing, for those who had pushed me to the margins, to finally face the truth. And truth came with consequences. David and Rachel's lives began to unravel. The small company David co-owned started losing clients. They were accused online of exploiting a family elder. Community pages began sharing the video, tagging the business. Their names trended on local podcasts. And then David called. His voice was hoarse, not the confident tone from the day Rachel barged into my room. "Mom, you've won. You've destroyed our lives. We can't show our faces in public anymore." I didn't respond right away. There was no satisfaction in hearing it, just stillness. Then I said calmly, "I didn't destroy anything. I simply stood up." After being silent for far too long, he hesitated. "I'm sorry. I let it get out of control." Rachel's sorry too. We just wanted to get ahead in life. I took a long, deep breath. "And you thought getting ahead meant making your mother pay rent in her own home? Hiding documents? Replacing your parents' pictures like we were already dead?" He had no words. "You don't just owe me an apology, David. You owe your own children one because you taught them how to treat the person who gave everything for you. And you owe your father an apology, the man who built every inch of this home with his bare hands. Not so it could be stolen, but so it could be protected." I ended the call. No tears, no shaking, just release. 3 weeks later, David and Rachel moved out. No drama, no yelling, just a quiet moving van, heavy footsteps, and a passing glance through a car window. They didn't say goodbye. I didn't step outside to watch them leave. I stood behind the curtain, watching them take what they could. The modern sofa, the wedding portraits, the porcelain dishes I once gave David on his first birthday. I didn't mourn anything they took, because what truly mattered, they could never take with them. The next morning I opened every window. Fresh air swept through the house like a wave of breath after years of suffocation. I pulled down the curtains Rachel installed and replaced them with my old white lace ones. I spread a new cloth over the dining table, and I brought out Richard's rocking chair, placing it back on the porch where the sun could kiss it each morning. The house didn't just feel empty, it felt mine again. No more footsteps that weren't mine. No more hushed voices behind closed doors. No more stolen glances that made me feel like I didn't belong. I wasn't merely surviving in this space anymore. I was living again. One late afternoon near the end of the month, the air was crisp and golden sunlight spilled gently across my porch. I was dusting off an old photo frame when the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone. Since David and Rachel had moved out, the house had been quiet, like a warm, thick blanket. No shouting, no footsteps that didn't belong. Standing at the door was Sarah. She wore an old knitted coat and held a fabric-wrapped frame in her hands. Her eyes were red. "Mom, I'm sorry. I know I should have spoken up sooner. I know I stayed silent for too long." I didn't embrace her, but I didn't shut the door either. I simply stepped aside and let her in. Sarah placed the frame on the table and unwrapped it. It was a photo of me and my granddaughter when she was about 3. Chubby cheeks, arms wrapped around my neck, both of us laughing in the sunlight. I stared at the photo for a long time. "You didn't betray me the way David did," I said softly, "but you also didn't protect me." Sarah nodded, her voice trembling. "I know, and I'm not asking for forgiveness right away. I'm just asking for a chance to make things right with my actions." Since that day, Sarah started visiting more often, not with loud gestures, not with grand apologies, just quietly, helping me with the garden, driving me to the market, sitting beside me to listen. One afternoon, she asked, "Mom, if I get married again, would you walk me down the aisle?" I smiled. "If you mean it, and if you understand what that truly means." I wasn't the kind of mother who forgave easily anymore. I had learned forgiveness is a choice, not an obligation. Love isn't rebuilt with tears, it's rebuilt with responsibility and time. My house slowly came back to life, not with expensive furniture, but with air I could breathe freely again. With morning sunlight through the lace curtains I chose myself. With quiet afternoons in Richard's rocking chair, rereading his old love letters. I continued volunteering at the local community center, joining a support group for older adults who had experienced financial and emotional abuse by their families. There, I wasn't a victim. I was a voice that broke the silence. And then I did one final thing. I revised the trust fund Richard had left me. I designated a large portion of the remaining assets to create a new fund. I named it the Backbone Fund. Its purpose, to provide temporary housing, legal aid, and emotional support to elderly people pushed out by their families, manipulated or silenced. I didn't need to leave this house to anyone. Instead, I chose to leave behind a fire, small but warm enough to help someone else find their way out of the dark. Sarah's wedding was held beneath the maple tree in the backyard. That tree had stood there for over 30 years. Richard planted it with Mark when Sarah was still learning to walk. Now its amber-red leaves drifted down like silent blessings. There weren't many guests, no extravagance, just a few wooden chairs, a single long table with a white cloth and a simple floral arch where they would exchange vows. Sarah walked up to me, her hand slightly trembling. I looked into her eyes. There was no sadness there, no lingering resentment, just stillness, like a lake after a storm. "Are you ready, Mom?" she asked. I didn't answer. I simply placed her hand gently on my arm. We walked together, slowly, between 2 rows of chairs, under the warm golden light of the late afternoon. No one spoke. No one needed to. Richard wasn't there, but I felt him in every falling leaf, in the breeze whispering through the branches. I felt him in my steady footsteps, walking our daughter toward a new chapter. After the ceremony, I returned to my study. On the wall, I had framed the first rent invoice David ever sent me. Below it, I hung a small wooden plaque. It read, "You are not a burden, you are the backbone." I didn't hang it there to remember the pain. I hung it to remember the return. That night, I brewed myself a cup of tea and sat on Richard's old rocking chair. The wind blew softly. A few insects chirped in the distance. Moonlight spilled across the porch floor, highlighting the little scratches in the wood. Marks of the years we had lived, loved, and endured. I didn't need a perfect ending. I only needed to know I stood up, I spoke, and I remained myself. If you're reading this, yes, you, the one who is enduring in silence, pushed aside in your own home, treated like a shadow, I want to tell you this. Peace built on silence is just a beautiful cage. True peace begins the moment you say, "No more."